At a quiet seaside cafe in Havenwood, a black woman delivers breakfast and smiles at regular customers. Suddenly, a group of bikers strides in, arrogantly demanding protection money. They threaten her boss and begin raiding local shops. That night, she disappears from the cafe, then reappears in the blind spot of a biker camp, with a weapon in hand and a plan already in motion. What the gang doesn't know is that the delivery girl didn't come here to run, she came to end them. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from. And subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The Daily Grind was the vibrant pulse of Havenwood. Its warm, inviting facade with a welcoming wooden sign had been a fixture since 1968, serving hearty breakfasts and aromatic coffee to generations of locals. The cafe's broad windows offered a perfect vantage point of the street, where occasional fishing trawlers rumbled past on their way to the docks, and familiar faces meandered by with reassuring regularity. Behind the polished oak counter stood Aunt Carol, the spry 70-year-old owner who had inherited the beloved spot from her sister, Aunt Ruby. Her experienced hands moved with effortless grace as she wiped down the well-worn countertop. The cafe's morning surge had softened, leaving only a handful of regulars leisurely sipping their coffees. "Order up for the lighthouse keepers," Aunt Carol called out gently, sliding a large insulated bag across the counter. Nia Washington emerged from the back room, adjusting her simple indigo apron bearing the Daily Grind's anchor logo. At 38, Nia might not have been considered young in the broader sense, but in Havenwood, she was still among the fresher faces. Her dark, natural curls were pulled back in a practical bun, framing an intelligent face that rarely needed adornment. A fitted denim jacket covered a plain white t-shirt paired with faded jeans and practical sturdy sneakers. Nothing about her outer appearance hinted at anything extraordinary. "Got it, Aunt Carol," Nia said, her voice carrying a quiet confidence that somehow put everyone around her at ease. "That's the breakfast burritos and the blueberry scones, right? And Captain Sam's usual extra side of hot sauce," Aunt Carol added with a knowing grin. "That man's going to breathe fire one of these days." Nia chuckled, her deep brown eyes swiftly scanning the bag's contents with a precision that bordered on professional. A quick check that took less than 2 seconds. "Should be back in about 50 minutes, unless Mrs. Thompson wants to talk about her grand kittens again." "Take your time, dear. Things are calm today." Aunt Carol glanced at the nearly empty cafe. "And Nia, be careful on that old coastal road. Ben Carter said he saw some bikers camped near Osprey Cove yesterday. Probably just tourists passing through, but you never know these days." Something flickered in Nia's eyes, a momentary sharpening of focus that vanished so swiftly most people would have missed it, but her voice remained outwardly calm. "I'll keep an eye out." The bell above the door chimed softly as Nia stepped out into the bright morning sun. She unhooked her sturdy delivery bike from the rack, a practical model with a large basket mounted on the front and saddlebags on either side. Most deliveries in Havenwood were handled this way. The town wasn't sprawling, and a car felt excessive for short trips. As Nia pedaled down Main Street, she moved with an economy of motion that didn't draw attention but would have impressed any kinesiologist. Her back remained straight, her breathing steady, her pace unwavering. No wasted effort, nothing flashy, just someone who knew precisely how to move. The townsfolk who waved to her as she passed saw only what they expected: the quiet delivery girl from the Daily Grind, who had returned to town about 2 years ago to look after her ailing Aunt Mildred. Nia had grown up in Havenwood, but had left after college. The prevailing story was that she had worked some government job far away before returning home. Most people in town didn't probe much deeper than that. The Lighthouse Keepers Station lay about 4 miles outside town, down a winding road that hugged the coastline, before cutting through a stretch of dense maritime forest. Nia maintained her consistent pace, occasionally shifting gears as the terrain changed. Her eyes, however, never ceased their methodical sweep, scanning the road ahead, checking the tree line, glancing at reflective surfaces to monitor what was behind her. Old habits. As she rounded a bend in the road, the distinct sound reached her before she spotted the source: the unmistakable rumble of multiple motorcycle engines. Nia didn't alter her pace or betray any reaction, but her mind instantly categorized the sound. At least 5 bikes, maybe 6. Heavy machines, likely American-made, not nimble sport bikes. They appeared around the next curve. 6 riders on gleaming cruisers moving in a tight, disciplined formation. The lead rider was a hulking figure of a man, his massive frame making even the large bikes seem small beneath him. A long, dark beard leather vest adorned with patches, arms thick as tree trunks, and covered in elaborate tattoos. Behind him rode 5 others similarly dressed but varying in stature and age. As they approached, Nia moved her bicycle to the far right of the road, affording them ample space to pass. She kept her head down, appearing to focus on the road surface, but her peripheral vision absorbed every minute detail: the patches on their vests, the weapons almost certainly concealed under their leather jackets, the fluid way they moved in perfect coordination, like men who had ridden together for years. The lead biker slowed as they passed her, his head turning slightly in her direction. For the briefest instant, their eyes met. His were cold, shrewd, assessing. Nia kept her expression neutral, revealing nothing. Just another local on a delivery run. After they passed, Nia didn't turn to watch them go, but instead focused on the fading sound of their engines tracking their progress by ear as they continued toward town. Only when the rumble had completely vanished did she permit herself a single deep breath. The lighthouse keeper's station materialized ahead, a classic white lighthouse with an adjacent cottage and several outbuildings overlooking a stretch of pristine beach. As Nia wheeled her bike up the gravel path, the cottage door opened and Mrs. Beatrice Higgins, the 60-year-old head keeper, stepped onto the porch. Mrs. Higgins possessed a warm smile that instantly put people at ease. "Right on time as always, Nia," she called out. "Mr. Peterson's out checking the lights, but he'll be sorry he missed you. Come on in for a moment. I just brewed some fresh hibiscus tea." Nia secured her bike and carried the food bag up to the porch. "Just for a minute, Mrs. Higgins. I told Aunt Carol I'd be back soon." The cottage kitchen was bright and airy, filled with the comforting scent of sea salt and old wood. Mrs. Higgins poured tea into 2 mugs while Nia unpacked the food order onto the counter. "So, Mrs." Higgins said, her tone shifting to that distinct cadence rural gossip had perfected over generations. "Did you see those bikers on your way here? They rode past about 15 minutes ago, 6 of them looking rough as barnacles." Nia accepted the tea with a grateful nod. "I passed them on the road. Any idea who they are?" Mrs. Higgins shook her head. "Not the usual tourist types, that's for sure. Mr. Peterson says they've been camped down by Osprey Cove the last couple of days. He thought they might be with that group causing trouble over in Emerald City last month. What were they called? Shadow something." "Shadow serpents," Nia supplied, then instantly regretted it when Mrs. Higgins' eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's right. How'd you know that?" Nia shrugged casually. "It was in the Havenwood Chronicle last week. There was an article about them causing problems in towns along Highway 17. Mrs. Higgins seemed to accept this explanation. "Well, Mayor Vance better keep an eye on them. Last thing we need is trouble, especially with the annual seafood festival coming up next weekend." They chatted for a few more minutes, Mrs. Higgins sharing updates on the local bird population and the latest town news before Nia politely excused herself and headed back toward town. As she pedaled, her mind processed Mrs. Higgins's words, the shadow serpents. The name triggered memories Nia had worked diligently to compartmentalize, not from her early military service, that was another lifetime ago, but from her subsequent work. The classified operation she'd been part of for 8 years after leaving military intelligence, the Specialized Task Force, focusing on domestic criminal organizations using sophisticated tactics and cross-border networks. The Shadow Serpents weren't merely a rowdy biker gang. They were one of the most entrenched smuggling organizations on the East Coast, with ties to international cartels and distribution networks spanning 7 states. Their public facade was that of a motorcycle club, rough, but generally within the confines of the law. Their private operations involved illegal narcotics weapons trafficking and targeted violence against rivals or informants. And now they were in Havenwood, a town with precisely 2 sheriff's deputies and a largely volunteer police force. Nia's return journey to the daily grind was swifter than her outbound trip. As she approached town, she noticed the 6 motorcycles parked outside the Salty Dog, the only bar in Havenwood that opened before noon. She discreetly filed away the information and continued on to the coffee shop. The lunch rush was in full swing when Nia walked through the door. Aunt Carol waved her over to the counter where 4 more delivery orders awaited. "Did Mrs. Higgins talk your ear off?" Aunt Carol asked as she rang up a customer's bill. "Just the usual bird updates," Nia replied, picking up the next delivery slip. "And some talk about those bikers in town." Aunt Carol's expression subtly darkened. They came in about 25 minutes ago, ordered breakfast, made too much noise, left a mess. Tipped well, though I'll give them that. She lowered her voice. One of them, a big fellow with a serpent tattoo on his neck, kept asking questions about the town. Who owns what businesses, how many police officers we have, that sort of thing. Nia's face betrayed nothing, but her mind was already calculating possibilities. None of them good. Probably just passing through, she said lightly. Hope so. Anyway, this order's for Dr. Hansen's clinic, then the bank, then the general store. Nia nodded and returned to her tasks. The remainder of the day passed in a rhythmic cycle of deliveries, brief conversations, and careful observation. By closing time at 7:00 p.m., she had meticulously mapped out the bikers' movements through town. They'd visited nearly every business, spent 3 hours at the Salty Dog, and ridden out toward Osprey Cove around 5:00 p.m. As Nia helped Aunt Carol close up the daily grind, the local news played on the small television behind the counter. The broadcast cut to a segment that immediately seized Nia's attention. Authorities in Emerald City are still investigating last month's devastating fire at the city archives, the anchor reported. Sources close to the investigation suggest the blaze may be linked to missing evidence in a major smuggling case. The Emerald City Police Department has declined to comment on rumors that the notorious Shadow Serpents motorcycle gang may be involved. The report continued, but Nia had heard enough. The pattern was unmistakably clear. The Shadow Serpents were systematically moving through small towns along Highway 17, eliminating evidence and establishing new distribution points for their illicit operations. Terrible business, that fire, Aunt Carol commented as she wiped down the last table. My cousin lives in Emerald City, says the whole police department's in chaos trying to rebuild their files. Nia made a non-committal sound as she swept the floor. Her mind was elsewhere, meticulously running through contingencies and calculating risks. Are you heading straight home tonight? Aunt Carol asked as they stepped outside into the cool evening air. Yeah, Aunt Mildred's waiting for dinner, Nia replied, securing her backpack to her bicycle. See you tomorrow, Aunt Carol. The ride to Nia's modest bungalow on the edge of town took less than 10 minutes. The small house sat back from the road, partially veiled by mature pine trees and blooming azaleas. A neatly kept garden bordered the front walkway, and warm light glowed from the windows. Nia wheeled her bicycle around to the back of the house and pushed open the door into a small utility room. She secured 4 separate locks on the door before proceeding into the kitchen. Aunt Mildred Washington sat at the kitchen table, a book open in front of her. At 72, she still possessed the keen features Nia had inherited, though her once dark hair had turned a distinguished silver. Her hands, twisted slightly by arthritis, marked the pages of her book. You're late, Aunt Mildred observed without looking up. Busy day, Nia replied, hanging her jacket on a hook by the door. How are you feeling? Same as yesterday. Better than tomorrow will be. Aunt Mildred finally looked up, her deep brown eyes identical to Nia's, sharp and assessing. They're in town, aren't they? There was no need to ask who they were. Nia nodded once as she filled a kettle at the sink. And 6 of them. Advance party, probably. Aunt Mildred closed her book. You should call Sam. Not yet. I need more information first. Aunt Mildred sighed. Nia, you're not with the agency anymore. You don't need to handle this alone. I'm not handling anything. I'm just keeping an eye on the situation. Nia put the kettle on the stove and turned to face her aunt. And Sam's not with the contractors anymore either. He's retired. Like you're retired. Aunt Mildred's tone was pointed. Nia didn't respond immediately. Her relationship with her aunt had always been complicated by the things she couldn't say. The classified operations, the targets neutralized the missions that officially never took place. But Aunt Mildred had been a military social worker during multiple conflicts. She understood enough. I'll make some calls tomorrow, Nia finally conceded, just to update some old contacts. Aunt Mildred nodded, seemingly satisfied. Good. Now there's a seafood stew in the oven. I managed that much today. After dinner, Nia helped her aunt to bed, then moved through the house, performing a precise security check. Windows, locked blinds, drawn alarm system activated. Only then did she descend to the basement. To a casual observer, the basement appeared to be a typical storage area. Boxes stacked neatly against walls, old furniture covered with sheets, a washer and dryer in one corner. But behind a seemingly solid concrete wall, accessed by a hidden mechanism, lay a room that reflected the other side of Nia Washington's life. The hidden room was small, but efficiently organized. One wall held a secure weapons locker and a separate cabinet for ammunition. Another featured a communication station with encrypted equipment that would have looked perfectly at home in a military command center. A third wall was dedicated to physical training, a pull-up bar, free weights, and a heavy bag. Nia entered a complex code into the secure locker and opened it to reveal a meticulously maintained collection: a Glock 17 handgun, a Benelli M4 shotgun, an AR-15 carbine with various modifications, and several other specialized tools. She removed the Glock, checked it methodically, and secured it in a concealed holster at the small of her back. Moving to the communication station, she activated an encrypted laptop and entered a series of passwords. The screen populated with a secure connection to a database that officially didn't exist. Nia typed Shadow Serpents into the search field and began reviewing the latest intelligence. What she found confirmed her deepest suspicions. The Shadow Serpents had significantly expanded their operations in the past year, moving into smaller coastal communities where law enforcement presence was minimal. Their modus operandi was consistent: establish a presence, intimidate local businesses into cooperation, set up distribution points for their product, eliminate any evidence in nearby jurisdictions that might lead back to them. And they were notoriously violent. The database contained reports of beatings, arson, and at least 4 suspected murders attributed to the gang, but never definitively proven in court. Witnesses had a troubling habit of recanting testimony or disappearing altogether. A new entry caught Nia's eye: a federal indictment against Leon the Serpent Maxwell, the Shadow Serpents president, unsealed just 3 weeks ago. The charges included racketeering, international smuggling, and conspiracy to commit murder. Maxwell had immediately vanished from the public eye, last seen heading south from his base in South Carolina. Nia studied the attached photograph. The massive bearded man who'd led the bikers through Havenwood that morning was undoubtedly Leon Maxwell, which meant the Shadow Serpents weren't just passing through. They were hiding their leader while simultaneously expanding their operation, and they'd chosen Havenwood, her town, as their new base. Nia closed the laptop and leaned back in her chair, considering her options. The simplest approach would be to alert the FBI and let them handle it. But federal response times to rural coastal locations were measured in days, not hours. By the time a tactical team could deploy, the Shadow Serpents might have already established themselves in Havenwood, and if they felt threatened, their standard response was overwhelming violence. No, she needed more information before involving federal authorities. She needed to understand precisely what they were planning and how many more members might be en route to Havenwood. Most importantly, she needed to determine if they knew who she was, if her cover as a simple coffee delivery girl was still intact. Nia checked her watch. Nearly midnight. Time to conduct some reconnaissance. 30 minutes later, Nia pedaled her bicycle along the dark road toward Osprey Cove. She had changed into dark clothing, but otherwise maintained her delivery girl appearance, the perfect cover for someone out late after a long shift. The night air was cool against her face, carrying the briny scent of the ocean and damp sand. Osprey Cove was a secluded camping spot about 5 miles outside town, a wide, sandy area beside the inlet, with fire pits and crude tables maintained by local volunteers. The Shadow Serpents had chosen the most remote section accessible by a dirt track that branched off from the main camping area. Nia left her bicycle hidden in dense undergrowth 3/4 of a mile from their camp and continued on foot, moving silently through the forest with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this many times before. As she drew closer, she detected the faint glow of a campfire through the trees and the low murmur of voices. She found a position on a slight rise that offered a clear view of the camp while providing excellent cover among the dense maritime pines. From her vantage point, she counted 10 motorcycles, the 6 she'd seen earlier, plus 4 more that must have arrived during the day. Around the campfire sat 9 men passing bottles and talking in low voices. The 10th was presumably on watch somewhere along the perimeter. Nia remained absolutely still, controlling her breathing, as she had been trained, becoming an undetectable part of the forest around her. Her eyes picked out details in the dim light: weapons placed within easy-reach duffel bags that likely contained contraband or cash, a satellite phone being used by Maxwell. "Tomorrow, we bring in the rest," Maxwell was saying, his deep voice carrying clearly in the night air. "Blades bringing the main shipment through on the old Fisherman's Trail. Should be here by noon." "What about the town?" asked one of the others, a wiry man with a shaved head. The sheriff seemed a little too interested when I stopped for gas. Maxwell's laugh was like grinding seashells. "Two-person department, Spike. They're not going to be a problem. We'll start the buy-offs tomorrow. Standard arrangement. Any business that doesn't play ball gets a visit from you and Hammer." The conversation continued with Maxwell elaborating on their plan. They would establish a distribution center in Havenwood, using the Seafood Festival as cover to bring in their product and make connections with buyers from across the region. They had already identified several businesses as potential fronts, including an abandoned fish cannery on the edge of town that would serve as their main base of operations. "What about the coffee shop?" asked another man. "That old lady didn't seem too friendly." The Daily Grind Maxwell considered for a moment. "Seems popular. Might be useful. Send Hammer to have a chat with her tomorrow. If she doesn't want our protection, maybe we'll help ourselves to some pastries." The crude joke elicited laughter from the group. Nia had heard enough. She began to slowly withdraw, maintaining her silent movement through the underbrush. She had nearly reached her bicycle when a twig snapped to her right. She froze, every sense heightened. 25 yards away, barely visible in the darkness, stood a large figure smoking a cigarette, the 10th Shadow Serpent, the one on watch duty. He hadn't seen her yet, but he was between her and her bicycle. Nia assessed her options in an instant. She could circle around him, adding time, but avoiding detection. She could neutralize him quietly, but that would alert the gang that someone was watching them. Or she could create a diversion. She chose the third option. Picking up a small stone, she threw it with precision into the woods far to her left. It crashed through branches and underbrush, creating enough noise to sound like a deer moving through the forest. The guard immediately turned toward the sound, moving away from his post to investigate. Nia used the opportunity to slip past him and retrieve her bicycle. By the time the guard returned to his position, she was already a mile away, pedaling steadily back toward town. The eastern horizon was beginning to lighten as Nia locked her bicycle in the garage and entered her house. She moved silently through the darkened rooms, not wanting to wake her aunt. In the kitchen, she poured a glass of water and stood by the window, watching as the first birds began to stir in the trees outside. The Shadow Serpents were planning something far grander than she had initially suspected. By tomorrow, their full complement would be in Havenwood, along with a major illicit shipment, and they had specifically mentioned the Daily Grind. Nia knew she needed to act quickly, but also carefully. One wrong move could jeopardize everyone in town. She needed a plan, and she needed help. Picking up her secure phone, she composed a text message to a number few people in the world had access to seagulls nesting in the lighthouse. "Full flock arriving tomorrow. Need navigational assistance." Within minutes, a response appeared: "Cartographer available. ETA 80 hours. Maintain observation only." Nia frowned at the message. 80 hours. That meant the earliest her former federal contact could have a team in place would be over 3 days from now. By then, the Shadow Serpents would be fully entrenched in Havenwood, and their shipment would be hidden away somewhere. She would have to handle the initial containment herself, and that meant she needed local resources, people she could trust, people who could help her monitor the Shadow Serpents until federal support arrived. Fortunately, Havenwood held more secrets than its peaceful appearance suggested. And Nia Washington wasn't the only former specialist who had chosen the small town as a place to disappear. As dawn broke over the Atlantic, Nia finally allowed herself a few hours of rest. But her sleep was light, her mind still processing what she had learned. The peaceful routine of Havenwood was about to be shattered, and Nia Washington, the quiet delivery girl from the Daily Grind, was the only one who stood between the town and the approaching storm. The Daily Grind opened at 6:00 a.m. sharp, as it had every day for nearly 6 decades. Nia arrived 10 minutes early, her face showing no signs of her nighttime reconnaissance or abbreviated sleep. She moved through her opening duties with practiced efficiency, brewing coffee, checking supplies, wiping down already clean counters. Aunt Carol arrived at 5:58, unlocking the front door with the same brass key her sister had used before her. She raised an eyebrow at Nia, who was already in full uniform. "You're eager this morning," Aunt Carol commented, hanging her weathered apron on the coat rack. Nia poured a cup of coffee and handed it to her boss. "Couldn't sleep. Figured I might as well make myself useful." The morning proceeded with its usual rhythm of regular customers, familiar orders, and easy conversation. By 8:30 a.m., the breakfast rush had dwindled to a few lingering patrons reading newspapers or tapping on tablets. Nia was organizing delivery orders when the bell above the door chimed. The man who entered was lean and hard-looking, with close-cropped gray hair and the ramrod straight posture that screamed military to anyone who knew the signs. He wore a canvas shirt and work pants with heavy boots that had seen years of use. To most people in town, he was just Sam Davis, the taciturn electrician who could fix anything from faulty wiring to stubborn boat engines. To Nia, he was Samuel the Fixer Davis, former paramilitary contractor who had served multiple tours in covert operations before retiring to Havenwood 4 years ago. Sam nodded to Aunt Carol, then took a seat at the counter directly in front of where Nia was working. "Morning, Sam," Aunt Carol called out. "The usual, please." His voice was gravelly from years of shouting orders over gunfire and dusty terrain. Nia set a mug of black coffee in front of him, making brief but significant eye contact. Sam's expression didn't change, but he gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Gotta shorten my garage lights," he said casually. "Any chance you could ask your aunt if I can borrow that wiring kit I lent her last month?" Nia played along with the cover story. "Sure, I'll swing by your place after my shift if that works." "Perfect." Sam sipped his coffee, then lowered his voice. "Heard some motorcycles riding by my place late last night. Sounded like they were headed out to Osprey Cove." "Probably those bikers who came through yesterday," Nia replied, keeping her tone conversational as she wiped down the counter. "I passed them on my delivery route." Sam's eyes, still sharp and assessing despite his 60-plus years, narrowed slightly. Seemed like a lot of bikes for tourists. Before Nia could respond, the bell over the door chimed again. This time, the atmosphere in the cafe changed instantly. Conversation stopped. Coffee cups paused midway to lips. Every eye turned toward the newcomer. He was tall and powerfully built, with a shaved head and a beard trimmed close to his jaw. His leather vest prominently displayed the Shadow Serpent's insignia, a coiled serpent with glowing red eyes. Multiple patches adorned the vest, each representing claimed territory or accomplished missions that no legitimate motorcycle club would openly admit to. His name was Marcus Hammer Thorne, according to the intelligence Nia had reviewed the night before. Former Special Operations Dishonorable Discharge Enforcer for the Shadow Serpents, specialized in intimidation and arson. Hammer surveyed the cafe with cold eyes, his gaze lingering on each person for just long enough to make them uncomfortable. When he looked at Nia, she kept her expression neutral, projecting nothing but mild curiosity. "Morning," he said, his voice surprisingly soft for a man his size. "Heard this place makes the best breakfast in town." Aunt Carol, to her credit, maintained her professional demeanor. "We like to think so. Take any seat you want. Nia will bring you a menu." Nia grabbed a laminated menu and approached Hammer, who had selected a booth with a clear view of both the front door and the kitchen entrance. Basic tactical positioning. She set the menu down without comment and turned to leave. "You're the delivery girl, right?" Hammer asked, stopping her. Nia paused, then turned back with a polite smile. "That's right. Can I get you some coffee while you look at the menu?" "Sure." His eyes never left her face. "Saw you on the road yesterday. You get around town quite a bit with those deliveries." "It's a small town. I go everywhere eventually." Hammer's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Good to know. I might have some deliveries of my own that need handling while we're in town." The implied meaning was clear. The Shadow Serpents were looking for local distribution channels for their product. Nia kept her expression pleasantly disinterested. "The daily grind just handles food deliveries, but I'm sure you can find what you need." She turned toward the coffee pot, feeling his eyes on her back the entire time. At the counter, Sam Davis watched the interaction with the practiced casualness of a man who had conducted surveillance in hostile territory. When Nia returned with Hammer's coffee, he murmured, "Your aunts still need help with that boat engine repair." Nia caught his meaning immediately. Sam was activating their informal network, the veterans and former operators who had settled in Havenwood to escape their pasts. "Yes," she replied softly. "The outboard motor particularly." Sam nodded once left cash for his coffee and departed without another word. Nia knew what would happen next. Sam would contact Ben Carter, former Coast Guard Search and Rescue, who would reach out to Dr. Lena Hansen, former Air Force flight surgeon with combat experience. The network would activate, creating a web of observation posts around Havenwood within hours. For the next 35 minutes, Nia maintained her cover, serving customers and preparing deliveries, while keeping one eye on Hammer. He ate slowly, making his breakfast last while he studied everyone who entered or left the cafe. He made one phone call, speaking too quietly for Nia to overhear, but his expression suggested he was reporting back to Maxwell. When Hammer finally approached the register to pay his bill, Aunt Carol rang him up with professional courtesy. He leaned on the counter, subtly invading her personal space. "Nice place you got here," he said, glancing around. "Been in business long." "Since 1,968 inches, Aunt Carol replied stiffly. "That's impressive. Tough for small businesses these days." Hammer's tone shifted subtly. "A lot of unexpected expenses can come up. Insurance hikes, maintenance, security concerns." Aunt Carol's spine straightened. At 70, she had dealt with difficult customers for decades and recognized a thinly veiled threat when she heard one. "We manage just fine, thank you." Hammer smiled, revealing a gold tooth. "Sure you do. But everyone can use a little protection, right? My associates and I, we look out for places we like. Make sure nothing bad happens to them." He placed a business card on the counter. "Why don't you discuss it with whoever makes the financial decisions around here? We'll stop by tomorrow to work out an arrangement." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving behind a cafe full of tense customers and one very angry coffee shop owner. Aunt Carol picked up the card between two fingers as if it might contaminate her. "The nerve of that man," she muttered, then looked at Nia. "Can you believe that, coming in here and trying to shake us down like it's the 1970s? Nia took the card and examined it. It was blank, except for a phone number and the Shadow Serpent's insignia. "What are you going to do?" Aunt Carol snorted. "Call Sheriff Ramirez for all the good that'll do. Honestly, with the seafood festival starting tomorrow, he's already short-handed." She sighed heavily. "My father dealt with guys like this back in the day. They move through small towns like locusts, take what they want, destroy what they don't, then move on." Nia returned the card. "Maybe they'll just leave after the festival." "Maybe." But Aunt Carol didn't sound convinced. "Meanwhile, I've got deliveries that need to go out. The bank order is ready, then the pharmacy and town hall." Nia nodded and gathered the delivery bags, securing them in her backpack. As she headed for the door, Aunt Carol called after her. "Nia, be careful out there today. Those bikers. I don't like the way that one was looking at you." Nia offered a reassuring smile. "I'll keep my eyes open." Outside, the summer morning had blossomed into a perfect day, with clear blue skies and a gentle breeze that carried the scent of salt and pine from the surrounding forests. Nia unlocked her bicycle and secured the delivery bags, then set off toward the Havenwood Savings Bank. As she pedaled down Main Street, her trained eyes noted 4 more Shadow Serpent members positioned strategically around town. One leaning against a storefront smoking a cigarette, another sitting on his parked motorcycle watching the traffic, a third emerging from the hardware store with a paper bag that clinked with the sound of glass bottles. A fourth was conspicuously inspecting the wiring around a public building. Setting up for arson, Nia assessed the standard Shadow Serpent's tactic for businesses that refused their protection. She completed her first 2 deliveries without incident, maintaining her cover as the unassuming delivery girl while cataloging every Shadow Serpent she spotted. By the time she reached Town Hall with the lunch order for the mayor's office, she had counted 15 members in total, a significant presence for a town the size of Havenwood. Inside Town Hall, Nia was greeted by Miss Jenkins, the mayor's administrative assistant, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who missed nothing that happened in Havenwood. "Right on time as always, Nia," Miss Jenkins said, accepting the delivery bag. "Have you seen the commotion down at the festival grounds? Those motorcycle people are everywhere making demands about where they can park during the event, trying to get vendor permits at the last minute." Nia arranged her features into an expression of mild concern. "How many of them are there now?" Ms. Jenkins rolled her eyes. "At least a dozen that I've seen." Mayor Vance is beside herself. "The seafood festival brings in half our annual tourism revenue, and now these thugs are scaring people before it even starts." She lowered her voice. "Between you and me, Sheriff Ramirez is considering calling the state police for backup, but they're spread thin with that hurricane relief situation over in Wilmington." Nia nodded sympathetically. "Probably just passing through for the festival. Let's hope so." Miss Jenkins sighed, then changed the subject. "How's your Aunt Mildred doing? I heard her arthritis has been acting up again." "Good days and bad days," Nia replied, accepting the subtle shift to safer topics. "Today's one of the better ones." They chatted for a few more minutes before Nia excused herself to continue her deliveries. As she wheeled her bicycle back onto Main Street, she noticed a new development. Leon Maxwell himself was now in town, holding court outside the Salty Dog, with 5 of his lieutenants around him. The Shadow Serpent's leader looked even more imposing in daylight than he had in the forest darkness. Standing well over 6 feet tall, with massive shoulders and arms like tree trunks, he dominated the sidewalk. His dark, streaked beard reached halfway down his chest, partially obscuring the Shadow Serpent's insignia on his leather vest. The serpent tattoo on his neck seemed to grin malevolently in the sunlight. Nia kept her head down as she passed, but not before she noticed Maxwell's eyes tracking her movement. Something in his gaze made her instincts flare. Not just the usual threat assessment a predator makes of potential prey, but something more focused, more specific. Did he know who she was? Had her cover been compromised? Nia maintained her pace, giving no indication of her internal alert status. She completed her remaining deliveries with heightened awareness, noting that at each stop, a Shadow Serpent member seemed to be watching from a distance. By mid-afternoon, she had mapped out their positions throughout town and identified their likely headquarters, the abandoned Havenwood Fish Cannery, on the edge of town where motorcycle traffic had been steady all day. When she returned to the daily grind, Aunt Carol was in a state of controlled fury. "3 more of them came by while you were out," she said, her voice tight. "Asked if I'd considered their offer. Said they'd be back tonight after closing to discuss terms." Nia unloaded her delivery bag. "Did you call Sheriff Ramirez?" "For all the good it did. He came by, took a report, said he'd increase patrols." Aunt Carol made air quotes around the phrase. "With what manpower him and Deputy Evans against 15 armed bikers? Maybe they're just trying to scare you," Nia suggested, though she knew better. Aunt Carol shook her head. "No, this is the real deal. My cousin owns a diner over in Southport. Same thing happened there last year. These gangs move in demand protection money, then start using local businesses to launder their illegal earnings." Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped down the counter. "I'm not letting them take the daily grind. My sister built this place her mother before her." Nia touched Aunt Carol's arm gently. "No one's taking the daily grind, I promise." Something in Nia's steady tone made Aunt Carol look up sharply, studying her employee's face with new awareness. "Nia, what exactly did you do before you came back to Havenwood?" Nia maintained her cover seamlessly. "Administrative work for a government contractor. Nothing exciting." Aunt Carol didn't appear convinced, but didn't press further. "Well, whatever it was, I'm glad you're here now. There's something about you that makes a person feel safer." The rest of the afternoon passed in a tense holding pattern. News spread quickly through town about the Shadow Serpent's intimidation tactics. Several business owners reported similar protection offers. The general store, the pharmacy, even Dr. Hansen's clinic had received visits. By closing time, an unnatural quiet had settled over Havenwood. The usual evening foot traffic on Main Street was absent, with most residents choosing to stay home rather than risk encountering the bikers who now seemed to be everywhere. As Nia helped Aunt Carol close up the daily grind, she noticed Sam Davis walking past the cafe for the 4th time in an hour. A clear signal that he was maintaining surveillance. Their eyes met briefly through the window, and he gave a subtle hand signal. 12 positions covered. Good, the local network was in place. "You should go home, Aunt Carol," Nia said as they finished the closing routine. "I can handle the final cleanup." Aunt Carol hesitated. "Those bikers said they'd be coming by after closing. I'm not leaving you alone to deal with them." "I'll be fine," Nia assured her. "I'll just tell them they need to talk to you tomorrow. Go home to Uncle Ben. I'll lock up properly." After several more minutes of persuasion, Aunt Carol reluctantly agreed and departed through the back door, promising to return first thing in the morning. As soon as she was gone, Nia moved swiftly through the cafe, making subtle preparations that would appear normal to anyone watching, but gave her tactical advantages, adjusting the placement of tables to create clear lanes of movement, positioning heavy objects within easy reach, ensuring all potential improvised weapons were accessible. She had just finished when headlights swept across the front windows as several motorcycles pulled up outside the cafe. Nia positioned herself behind the counter, her right hand within inches of a heavy cast-iron griddle, her left close to the panic button Aunt Carol had installed years ago that connected directly to the sheriff's office. The door opened despite the closed sign clearly displayed, and Leon, the Serpent Maxwell, entered flanked by Hammer and two other shadow serpents. They moved with the confident swagger of men accustomed to intimidating others simply by existing in the same space. Nia maintained her delivery girl persona, letting a hint of nervousness show in her expression just enough to seem authentic without appearing weak. "I'm sorry we're closed," she said, her voice steady but not challenging. Maxwell's laugh was like grinding gravel. "That's all right, darling. We're not here for coffee." His eyes scanned the cafe. "Where's the old lady who runs this place?" "Miss Carol went home for the evening. If you'd like to leave a message, I can make sure she gets it tomorrow." Maxwell stepped closer to the counter, using his bulk to loom over Nia. Up close, his size was even more impressive, at least 6'5" inches, and solid muscle beneath the layer of fat that comes with middle age. The serpent tattoo on his neck seemed to watch Nia with its hollow eyes. "No message needed. We'll just have our conversation with you instead." He smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "What's your name, girl?" "Nia." "Well, Nia, here's how this works. Havenwood is Shadow Serpent's territory now. Every business pays for protection, insurance you might say, against bad things happening." He glanced around the cafe appreciatively. "Nice place like this. Be a shame if there was a fire or if customers stopped coming because they got hurt on the premises." Nia kept her expression neutral. "I'm just an employee, Mr. Maxwell. Leon Maxwell. But everyone calls me Crusher." His smile widened for obvious reasons. "Mr. Maxwell, I don't have any authority to make financial arrangements for the daily grind. You'll need to speak with Miss Carol." Hammer stepped forward, his patience visibly thinning. "Listen, delivery girl, we're not asking. The protection fee is $2,500 a month paid in cash starting tomorrow. You tell the old lady that." Nia allowed herself to appear intimidated, lowering her eyes slightly. "I'll tell her. Is there anything else?" Maxwell studied her for a long moment, his expression suddenly thoughtful. "You look familiar. Have we crossed paths before?" A flash of alarm raced through Nia's mind, carefully concealed behind her facade of nervousness. "I don't think so. I've lived in Havenwood most of my life, except for a few years away for work." "What kind of work?" Maxwell pressed. "Administrative government contractor, filing mostly." Maxwell continued to stare clearly, trying to place her face. Nia maintained her calm demeanor, though her muscles had tensed imperceptibly, ready to move if necessary. Finally, he seemed to dismiss whatever thought had troubled him. "Will you make sure the old lady gets our message? We'll be back tomorrow for the first payment." He turned to leave, then stopped and added, "And Nia, don't bother running to Sheriff Ramirez. Man's got a wife and 2 kids. Be a shame if something happened to them because he stuck his nose where it doesn't belong." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Nia nodded once, playing her role to perfection. "I understand." Maxwell and his men turned to leave, but as they reached the door, it swung open unexpectedly. Sam Davis stood in the doorway, his weathered face revealing nothing as he took in the scene. "Evening," Sam said mildly. "Just came by to check if Nia needed a ride home. Her bicycle's got a flat tire." Maxwell's eyes narrowed at the interruption. "And who might you be, old-timer?" "Just the electrician," Sam replied, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert. "Sam Davis. I fix things around town." Hammer stepped forward aggressively. "Well, Sam the electrician, you picked a bad time to play knight in shining armor. We're having a private business discussion here." Sam didn't budge from the doorway. "Looks to me like the business is concluded. Place is closed after all." A tense silence filled the cafe as Maxwell and Sam measured each other. Nia recognized the moment for what it was, 2 predators establishing territory. After several seconds, Maxwell surprisingly was the first to back down with a dismissive laugh. "Sure, we're done here for now." He gestured to his men, and they filed past Sam, deliberately bumping his shoulder on the way out. Maxwell was the last to leave. He paused beside Sam and said quietly, "Word of advice, handyman. This town's changing ownership. Decide which side you want to be on before it's too late." Sam's expression remained impassive. "I'll keep that in mind." Only when the motorcycles had roared away did Sam step fully into the cafe, closing and locking the door behind him. He moved to the windows and adjusted the blinds to prevent anyone from seeing inside, then turned to Nia. You okay? Nia nodded, already moving from behind the counter. They're setting up shop at the old cannery warehouse, at least 25 of them now. Maybe more coming. Maxwell recognized me or thinks he did. Not sure yet. Sam's expression darkened. That complicates things. What's your assessment? They're following their standard playbook, intimidate. The locals establish protection rackets, set up distribution channels for their product. Nia crossed to the kitchen and retrieved her backpack from the storage locker. Federal contact says earliest they can have a team here is 3 days from now. Too long, Sam said flatly. Once they're entrenched, getting them out becomes a siege operation. Civilian casualties likely. Nia nodded grimly. That's why we need to delay them, disrupt their setup until backup arrives. She pulled out a small encrypted phone from her backpack. I've activated the local network. Ben Carter's watching the North Inlet. Dr. Hansen is coordinating communications. Mayor Vance has the west approach covered. Sam raised an eyebrow. Mayor Vance, the school superintendent, former FBI. 2 tours with the Bureau's organized crime unit. A ghost of a smile touched Sam's lips. This town's full of surprises. His expression turned serious again. What's your play for tonight? Nia checked her watch. Reconnaissance. I need to get eyes on that warehouse. Confirm their numbers and resources. Identify vulnerabilities we can exploit. Not alone. You're not, Sam stated firmly. I'm coming with you. Nia started to object, then reconsidered. Despite his age, Sam Davis was still one of the most capable operators she'd ever known, and having backup would significantly reduce the risk. All right, meet me at the old coastal access road behind Finch's farm at 22:30 hours. Dark clothing, basic kit only. Sam nodded and moved toward the door. Be careful getting home. They've got people watching the main roads. After Sam left, Nia completed the closing procedures and exited through the back door, securing it behind her. Rather than taking her usual route home, she wheeled her bicycle through the alley behind Main Street, using the darkness and her knowledge of Havenwood's back roads to avoid potential observers. When she arrived home, Aunt Mildred was waiting in the kitchen, a vintage .380 revolver resting across her lap. You're late, Aunt Mildred said, her voice tight with concern. Got held up. Nia secured the door and moved to the window to check the street outside. The shadow serpents paid the daily grind a visit, made their protection pitch. Aunt Mildred's grip on the revolver tightened. Are they watching the house? Possibly. I took the long way home, but we should assume they're keeping an eye on key locations. Nia turned to face her aunt. I need to go back out tonight. Reconnaissance. Of course you do, Aunt Mildred said with a sigh that contained equal parts resignation and pride. Your father was the same way. Never could stay out of the fight. Nia checked her watch. She had 2 hours before meeting Sam. I need to prep, then I'll help you to bed before I go. Aunt Mildred waved off the offer. I'm not an invalid yet. Go do what you need to do. She hesitated, then added softly, come back in one piece. Nia moved to her aunt's side and placed a gentle kiss on her forehead. Always do. In the basement, Nia changed into dark tactical clothing, black cargo pants, a close-fitting, long-sleeve shirt, and soft-soled boots. She selected equipment with practiced efficiency, a combat knife in an ankle sheath, a small flashlight with a red filter, a communication earpiece, the Glock 17, in a shoulder holster, and extra magazines. She was securing the holster when her encrypted phone vibrated. The message was from Ben Carter. 10 new bikes arrived at Cannery. Armed guards posted at all entrances. Nia frowned at the information. The shadow serpents were moving faster than anticipated, building up their presence more quickly than their usual pattern. Something was driving their accelerated timeline. Perhaps Maxwell's federal indictment. Perhaps something else she wasn't yet aware of. At 10:45 p.m., Nia slipped out of her house through the basement's concealed exit, a narrow tunnel that led to an abandoned boathouse 60 yards from the main building. She moved through the darkness with practiced ease, avoiding the main roads and using the cover of trees and structures to mask her approach to the meeting point. Sam was already waiting when she arrived, a shadow among shadows at the edge of the tree line. He wore dark clothing similar to Nia's, and the outline of a holstered weapon was visible beneath his jacket. Clear route to the cannery through the old dune trail, he reported without preamble. Ben's in position on the North Ridge with optics. Doc Hansen's monitoring police channels from her home office. Nia nodded. Let's move. Maintain distance. Communicate by hand signals only unless absolutely necessary. They traveled in silence through the coastal forest that bordered the eastern edge of Havenwood, moving with the practiced stealth of experienced operators. Despite his age, Sam kept pace easily, his movements economical and precise. The abandoned cannery warehouse came into view after 25 minutes of careful navigation, a massive concrete and metal structure that had once been the economic heart of Havenwood before the fishing industry's decline. A chain-link fence surrounded the property topped with rusted barbed wire that had long since lost its deterrent value. Nia and Sam took up observation positions on a wooded hillside overlooking the warehouse complex. From this vantage point, they could see the entire facility while remaining concealed among the trees. The Shadow Serpents had established a significant presence. 30 motorcycles were parked in formation near the main entrance. Floodlights had been mounted on the exterior walls, illuminating the perimeter. Armed guards visible from their position patrolled the fence line. Most concerning was the activity at the loading dock. A large semi-truck had backed up to the main doors, and Shadow Serpent members were unloading crates and moving them inside. Even from a distance, the operation had the hallmarks of a major distribution setup. Nia and Sam observed in silence for nearly an hour, noting patrol patterns, identifying key personnel, and assessing defensive positions. They had just begun to withdraw when a new development caught their attention. A black luxury sedan with tinted windows pulled into the warehouse yard. 5 men emerged, not dressed in typical Shadow Serpents attire, but in dark suits that suggested cartel connections. Leon Maxwell himself came out to greet them, accompanied by Hammer and several heavily armed guards. Escalation, Sam whispered, his voice barely audible. Cartel representatives don't show up for routine deliveries. Nia nodded grimly. They're setting up something big using the seafood festival as cover. They watched as Maxwell led the visitors inside. Whatever was happening in that warehouse went beyond the Shadow Serpent's typical operations. This was a major expansion, possibly with international connections. As they began their careful withdrawal, Nia's instincts suddenly flared. She froze, signaling Sam to do the same. For several seconds, nothing moved except the guards visible at the warehouse. Then she saw a subtle shift in the shadows about 75 yards to their right. Someone else was watching the warehouse. Nia signaled to Sam, indicating the position. He acknowledged with a slight nod, then began a wide, flanking movement through the trees while Nia maintained observation. Minutes passed with agonizing slowness. Then Sam's voice came through her earpiece so soft it was barely audible. Sheriff Ramirez, alone, conducting his own reconnaissance. Nia processed this information quickly. Sheriff Ramirez was a decent lawman, but he had no tactical training for this kind of situation. If the Shadow Serpent spotted him, he'd be dead before he could call for backup. She made a quick decision, signaling Sam to hold position while she circled around behind the sheriff's location. Moving like a ghost through the underbrush, she approached until she was just a few yards behind Ramirez, who was peering at the warehouse through binoculars, completely unaware of her presence. "Don't move, Sheriff," she whispered close enough that he could hear, but not so loud that the sound would carry to the guards below. Ramirez stiffened, but had the good sense not to spin around or make a sudden movement. "Who's there?" he whispered back. "A friend. You need to withdraw now. You're in over your head." The sheriff remained frozen, binoculars still raised. "Those bastards threaten my family, threaten my town. I need evidence of what they're doing." "You'll get your evidence," Nia assured him. "But not tonight, and not like this. If they spot you, they'll kill you without hesitation." For a tense moment, Ramirez seemed to consider arguing. Then his shoulders slumped slightly. "How do I get out of here without being seen?" "Wait 45 seconds after I'm gone, then move directly west, staying low in the tree line. There's a man in a dark jacket who will guide you back to the access road." "Who are you people?" Ramirez asked, still not turning around. Nia was already moving away. "Just concerned citizens, Sheriff. We'll be in touch." She melted back into the forest before Ramirez could respond. Through her earpiece, Sam confirmed that he had made contact with the sheriff and was escorting him safely away from the warehouse. Nia continued her observation for another 20 minutes, gathering final details about the Shadow Serpent's operation. The cartel representatives emerged from the warehouse with Maxwell shook hands and departed in their luxury sedan. Whatever business they had concluded appeared to have gone well, judging by Maxwell's satisfied expression. By the time Nia rendezvoused with Sam at their extraction point, she had formulated the beginnings of a plan not to take down the Shadow Serpents that would require federal resources, but to disrupt their operation long enough for those resources to arrive. "Ramirez is secure," Sam reported. "Sent him home with a warning to stay put and protect his family." Nia nodded. "Good. We need to gather the network tonight." Sam raised an eyebrow. "That's serious." "Worse than we thought," Nia confirmed. "That wasn't just a drug delivery. They're setting up a major distribution hub with cartel connections. And based on what I saw, they're planning something specific during the seafood festival." "Dr. Hansen's house," Sam suggested. "Her basement has secure access through the storm cellar, and her wife's visiting their daughter in Charlotte." "1 hour," Nia agreed. "I'll contact the others." They separated, taking different routes back toward town to minimize the chance of detection. Nia moved through the darkness with heightened awareness, her mind processing everything she had observed at the warehouse. The Shadow Serpents were establishing a stronger presence in Havenwood than she had initially assessed. Their accelerated timeline and the cartel connection suggested something beyond their usual operation. And most concerning, they had specifically targeted the Daily Grind, Aunt Carol, and by extension, Nia herself. Whatever was coming, it would arrive soon. And Nia Washington, the unassuming delivery girl from the Daily Grind, would be at the center of the storm. As she slipped through the shadows of the sleeping town, Nia's resolve hardened. Havenwood was her home. These people were under her protection, and the Shadow Serpents were about to learn a painful lesson about underestimating their opponents. Maxwell's words from earlier echoed in her mind. This town's changing ownership. "No," Nia thought grimly, "not while I'm here." Dr. Hansen's house sat on a quiet street, blocks from Main Street, a well-maintained coastal bungalow with a wide front porch and meticulous landscaping that gave no hint of the high-tech security system concealed within its charming facade. As the town's only physician for 25 years, Dr. Hansen had earned the community's profound respect. Few knew that before settling in Havenwood, she had served as an Air Force doctor supporting special operations in missions that remain classified to this day. Nia approached from the rear using the cover of mature oak trees to reach the storm cellar entrance without being observed. A soft tap on the metal doors in a specific pattern caused them to unlock with a barely audible click. Inside Dr. Hansen's basement had been converted into a combination medical office and secure meeting room. Communications equipment lined one wall. A fully stocked medical station occupied another, and a large table with chairs dominated the center of the space. Sam was already there, along with Ben Carter and Mayor Eleanor Vance. Dr. Hansen herself was monitoring a bank of screens showing security camera feeds from various locations around Havenwood, including several Nia hadn't known existed. "Sheriff's home safe," Dr. Hansen reported without turning from her monitors. "And our friends at the warehouse are still busy unloading that truck." Nia set her backpack on the table. "What's our total count now?" 32 confirmed Shadow Serpents. Ben Carter answered his weathered fisherman's hands, spreading a map of Havenwood across the table. 5 at the Salty Dog, 7 at the Lighthouse Inn, the rest at the cannery, plus those cartel representatives who arrived in the sedan. Mayor Vance, the elementary school superintendent, whose military bearing was usually concealed beneath professional blazers and friendly smiles, pointed to various locations on the map. "They've established observation points here, here, and here. Main roads covered. They're watching key businesses including the Daily Grind." Nia absorbed this information mentally, overlaying it with what she had observed herself. They're moving faster than their usual pattern, setting up for something specific. "The seafood festival," Sam suggested. 4 days of tourist money flowing freely, perfect cover for major drug distribution in a captive market. 10,000 visitors expected according to the Chamber of Commerce. Dr. Hansen added grimly. Nia leaned over the map, studying it intently. "We need to disrupt their timeline, slow them down until federal support arrives." "Direct confrontation is out," Ben stated flatly. "We're outnumbered and outgunned, and we need to keep civilians safe." "Most people in town have no idea what's really happening," Mayor Vance added. Nia nodded in agreement. "We use guerrilla tactics, targeted disruption of their operation without revealing ourselves. Delay and distract until the federal agency can mobilize." For the next hour, they formulated a plan, not to defeat the Shadow Serpents outright, but to interfere with their operation, just enough to prevent them from establishing a foothold before federal authorities could arrive. Each member of the network would play to their strengths, using their knowledge of Havenwood and their specialized skills to create problems for the invaders. By the time Nia left Dr. Hansen's house, a careful strategy had been established. The veterans would begin implementation at first light, while Nia maintained her cover at the Daily Grind, gathering intelligence from the center of town. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten as Nia slipped back into her house through the concealed entrance. She secured her equipment in the hidden room, changed into her normal clothes, and emerged into the kitchen to find Aunt Mildred already awake and making coffee. "You look tired," Aunt Mildred observed, sliding a mug across the counter. Nia accepted it gratefully. "Long night productive?" "Yes, we have a plan." Aunt Mildred nodded, asking no further questions. After decades as a military spouse and then a military mother, she understood the value of operational security. "Your shift starts in an hour," she said instead. "I'll make you some breakfast." Nia smiled tiredly. "Thanks, Aunt Mildred." As she ate the simple meal of eggs and toast, Nia mentally prepared for the day ahead. The Shadow Serpents would be making their move soon, expecting to encounter nothing but frightened townsfolk and an overwhelmed sheriff. Instead, they would find their operation subtly but persistently hampered by an invisible resistance. And at the center of it all would be Nia Washington, the unassuming delivery girl from the Daily Grind, watching and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The morning dawned clear and bright with a freshness in the air that belied the tension gripping Havenwood. Nia arrived at the Daily Grind 10 minutes early, as was her habit, to find Aunt Carol already inside, pacing nervously. "Thank goodness you're here," Aunt Carol said, relief evident in her voice. "Did those men come back after I left last night?" Nia nodded, keeping her demeanor calm as she hung up her jacket. "They did. Made their pitch about protection money. $2,500 a month." Aunt Carol's face flushed with anger. $2,500, that's more than our monthly profit." "Did you tell them we'd call the sheriff?" "They specifically warned against that," Nia replied, moving behind the counter to start the coffee. "Threatened Sheriff Ramirez's family." Aunt Carol sank onto a stool, her expression shifting from anger to fear. "What are we going to do? The seafood festival starts tomorrow. The whole town will be full of visitors." "We buy time," Nia said simply. "Tell them you're considering their offer. Ask for a few days to get the money together." "And then what?" Nia met Aunt Carol's eyes. "And then we see what happens." Something in Nia's steady gaze seemed to reassure Aunt Carol. She straightened her shoulders and nodded. "All right, we buy time." The cafe opened at 6:00 a.m. as usual, but the morning unfolded in a way that was anything but normal. The regular breakfast crowd was noticeably thinner, with many locals choosing to stay home rather than venture into a town increasingly dominated by leather-clad bikers. Those who did come to the Daily Grind spoke in hushed tones about the Shadow Serpent's presence. Sheriff Ramirez had apparently made calls to neighboring jurisdictions for support, but with the seafood festival beginning the next day and resources already stretched thin across the region, help would be limited at best. By mid-morning, the plan that Nia and the veterans had put together began to show results. Ben Carter reported that the Shadow Serpent's boat fuel supply at the cannery had mysteriously been contaminated overnight, disabling several of their speedboats and motorcycles. Mayor Vance, using her authority as school superintendent, had convinced the town council to implement emergency safety protocols for the festival, resulting in increased private security presence that would complicate the Shadow Serpent's planned drug distribution. Most effective was Dr. Hansen's contribution. As the town physician, she had discreetly informed state health inspectors about potential contamination concerns at the Salty Dog, the bar the Shadow Serpents had claimed as their in-town base. The resulting surprise inspection and temporary closure order had thrown their communications into disarray. Nia monitored these developments while maintaining her delivery girl routine, circulating through town with the Daily Grind's food orders and gathering intelligence. The Shadow Serpents were visible everywhere now, their frustration evident as their carefully planned operation encountered unexpected obstacles. Around noon, Nia was loading her bicycle for a delivery run when a black motorcycle pulled up directly in front of the Daily Grind. The rider, a woman Nia hadn't seen before, removed her helmet to reveal short, dark hair and hard eyes. She wore the Shadow Serpent's colors, but with a patch that identified her as property of Crusher Maxwell's woman. She entered the cafe and approached the counter where Aunt Carol was working. "You Nia?" she asked bluntly. Nia straightened from her bicycle. "That's me." The woman's eyes performed a quick assessment, clearly unimpressed by what she saw. Crusher wants to see you now. Aunt Carol stepped forward protectively. She's working. We have deliveries to make. The woman ignored Aunt Carol, keeping her eyes fixed on Nia. It wasn't a request. His bike's outside. You're riding with me to the cannery. Nia maintained her delivery girl persona, allowing a flicker of fear to show on her face. Why does he want to see me? Not my job to explain. My job is to bring you in. The woman's hand moved slightly, revealing the outline of a weapon beneath her leather jacket. One way or another. Nia made a show of hesitation, then nodded reluctantly. Let me tell my boss where I'm going. She turned to Aunt Carol, whose face had gone pale with worry. It's okay, Nia said quietly. I'll go see what he wants and be back soon. Aunt Carol clutched Nia's arm. You don't have to go with her. Yes, she does, the woman interjected, unless you want your cute little cafe to burn down tonight. Nia gently disengaged from Aunt Carol's grip. It's better if I go. I'll be fine. The confidence in Nia's voice was genuine, though not for the reasons Aunt Carol might have assumed. This unexpected summons was actually an opportunity, a chance to gather intelligence from inside the Shadow Serpent's base of operations. Outside, Nia reluctantly climbed onto the motorcycle behind the woman, who introduced herself curtly as Viper. As they roared away from the daily grind, Nia's mind was already mapping the route and assessing potential escape routes should the situation deteriorate. The warehouse appeared much different in daylight than it had during her nighttime reconnaissance. The Shadow Serpents had established a formidable presence with armed guards visibly patrolling the perimeter and motorcycles lined up in military precision near the main entrance. Viper drove directly to a side door where two guards nodded them through without comment. Inside, the cavernous space had been transformed into a combination staging area and living quarters. One section contained neat rows of crates, the illicit shipment Nia had observed being unloaded the night before. Another held sleeping bags and personal belongings for the Shadow Serpent members. A third area had been set up as a command center with maps and communications equipment. Leon Maxwell sat at a table in this command area, studying what appeared to be plans for the Seafood Festival grounds. He looked up as Viper led Nia forward, his eyes narrowing slightly. The delivery girl as requested, Viper announced, then took up a position near the door. Maxwell gestured to a chair across from him. Sit down, Nia. Nia complied, maintaining her nervous demeanor while her trained eyes cataloged everything around her personnel positions, weapons exits, potential improvised weapons within reach. Do you know why I wanted to see you? Maxwell asked, his voice deceptively casual. Nia shook her head. No, sir. Maxwell leaned back in his chair, studying her face. You're not what you seem, are you? A flash of genuine alarm raced through Nia's mind. Had her cover been compromised, she maintained her confused expression. I don't understand. Sure you do. Maxwell reached into a folder beside him and withdrew a photograph, sliding it across the table. That's you, isn't it? Nia looked down at the image and felt a cold knot form in her stomach. The photograph showed her in a military uniform receiving a commendation from a high-ranking officer. It was from early in her career before her classified work, but it was unmistakably her younger haircut in military regulation, but her face clearly recognizable. She kept her expression neutral. Where did you get this? Maxwell smiled coldly. Let's just say the Shadow Serpents have friends in interesting places, including some who keep tabs on certain government employees. Nia's mind raced through possibilities. Her classified work had been carefully compartmentalized, her identity protected, but her earlier military service was a matter of public record if someone knew where to look. That was a long time ago, she said carefully. I left the service years ago. Maybe Maxwell didn't sound convinced, but it does make me wonder what a former Army officer is doing delivering coffee in a town like Havenwood, especially when that town suddenly starts having problems right after we arrive. Nia met his gaze steadily. I came back to take care of my aunt, that's all. Maxwell studied her for a long moment, then abruptly changed tactics. Here's what I think. I think you're more than you appear to be, and that makes you either a problem, he paused meaningfully, or an asset. A smart woman like you with military training knows how things work, knows when to look the other way, could be valuable to an organization like ours. Maxwell leaned forward. The Shadow Serpents reward loyalty very generously. Nia realized he was attempting to recruit her, or at least to determine whether she could be bought off. She decided to play along, seeing an opportunity to gather more intelligence. "What exactly are you suggesting?" she asked, allowing a hint of interest to creep into her voice. Maxwell seemed pleased by her response. "Simple. You do what you're already doing. Deliver food, move around town, freely keep your eyes and ears open. But you do it for us. Let us know if the sheriff is planning anything, if any strangers come to town asking questions, and in return, $600 a week cash, plus a percentage of certain business transactions once we're established here." Naya pretended to consider the offer buying time to observe more of the warehouse operation. "That's a lot of money just for information. Information is valuable in our line of work." Maxwell gestured around the warehouse. "What do you see here, Naya?" "A successful motorcycle club," she replied carefully. Maxwell laughed. "A successful business enterprise, one that's about to expand significantly. Havenwood is strategically located, isolated enough to operate without big city police interference, but connected enough to serve as a distribution hub for the entire region. And the Seafood Festival. Perfect cover. Thousands of visitors, cash flowing freely. Local law enforcement overwhelmed." Maxwell's expression hardened. "But I need to know if you're with us or against us, and I need to know now." Nia made a show of internal struggle before answering. "I need to think about it. This is a lot to process." Maxwell's face darkened. "That's not how this works. You're either in or you're out. And if you're out..." He let the threat hang unspoken. Nia nodded slowly. "I understand. It's just, I've never done anything like this before. First time for everything." Maxwell stood, signaling that the meeting was over. "You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Come back here with your answer. And Nia," his voice dropped to a menacing rumble, "don't get any ideas about going to the sheriff. We have people watching him, and you around the clock." As Viper escorted Naya back outside to the motorcycle, Nia maintained her facade of nervous consideration. But internally, her tactical mind was processing everything she had seen inside the warehouse, the layout, the number of guards, the location of the illicit shipment, the communications equipment, all valuable intelligence for what was coming next. The ride back to town was conducted in silence. Viper dropped Nia off in front of the daily grind with a final warning. "Tomorrow morning, don't be late." As the motorcycle roared away, Nia noted Sam Davis across the street, ostensibly fixing a storefront sign, but clearly monitoring the situation. She gave him a subtle hand signal, information obtained. No immediate threat. Inside, Aunt Carol rushed forward with relief evident on her face. "Thank God you're all right. What did they want? Did they hurt you?" "I'm fine," Nia assured her. "They wanted to offer me a job working for them instead of the cafe." Aunt Carol's expression shifted from relief to outrage. "The nerve first, they threaten us. Now they try to steal my employees." Nia guided Aunt Carol toward the back of the cafe away from the windows. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to trust me." For the next 12 minutes, Naya explained as much as she could without revealing her classified background, that she had military training, that she and several other veterans in town were working to disrupt the Shadow Serpent's operations, and that federal help was on the way, but wouldn't arrive for another 2 days. Aunt Carol listened with growing astonishment. "So all this time you've been, what, some kind of undercover agent?" "Nothing that dramatic," Nia lied smoothly. "Just someone with the right training to handle the situation. But I need your help." "Anything," Aunt Carol said firmly. "This is my town too. We need to keep the cafe running normally, act as if nothing has changed. And tomorrow when the festival starts, I need you to be somewhere safe." Aunt Carol straightened her spine. "This is my cafe. I'm not abandoning it." Nia recognized the stubborn determination in the older woman's eyes. "Then we'll make sure you're protected, but you need to follow my instructions exactly if things get dangerous. Promise me." After a moment's hesitation, Aunt Carol nodded. "I promise." The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Naya completed her delivery routes, gathering intelligence and passing coded messages to the Veterans Network. The disruptions they had orchestrated were having the desired effect. The Shadow Serpents were behind schedule, their operations hampered by mechanical failures, unexpected inspections, and logistical complications. By evening, the tension in Havenwood had reached a breaking point. Main Street was virtually deserted, except for Shadow Serpent members who now patrolled openly. Sheriff Ramirez had established a command post at Town Hall, but with only 3 deputies from neighboring jurisdictions as reinforcement, his ability to confront the gang was severely limited. As Nia helped Aunt Carol close the daily grind for the night, a sense of foreboding hung in the air. Tomorrow was the first day of the Seafood Festival. Thousands of visitors would pour into Havenwood, unaware of the danger lurking beneath the surface of the cheerful small-town celebration. "Will you be all right getting home?" Aunt Carol asked as they stepped outside, her eyes darting nervously toward a pair of shadow serpents watching from across the street. "I'll be fine," Nia assured her. "Sam's giving me a ride." As if on cue, Sam's battered pickup truck pulled up to the curb. Nia climbed in, giving Aunt Carol a reassuring wave as they drove away. "Maxwell made you," Sam said without preamble once they were clear of Main Street. "How bad?" "He has a photo from my Army days, knows I have military background, but doesn't seem aware of my classified work." Nia glanced out the window, checking for tails. "He tried to recruit me, wants an answer by tomorrow morning." Sam's weathered face remained impassive. "That buys us some time. What's your play?" "String him along, make him think I'm considering the offer. Meanwhile, we continue the disruption campaign." Nia turned to face Sam directly. "What's our status?" "Ben disabled their communications relay at the cannery. Doc Hansen's got 4 more veterans arriving tonight, friends from her Air Force days who were vacationing in Asheville. Mayor Vance has coordinated with the festival security team to concentrate on the areas we know they're planning to use for distribution." "Good. And federal support still on schedule for tomorrow night. Tactical team assembling in Jacksonville right now." Nia nodded, formulating the next phase of their plan. "Tomorrow morning, I go back to Maxwell as requested. Tell him I need more time to decide. That should keep him focused on me while you and the others continue the disruption operations." Sam gave her a sharp look. "That's high risk. He might decide you're not worth the trouble." "It's a calculated risk," Nia countered, "and it gives us the best chance of keeping civilians safe during the festival." They drove in silence for a few moments before Sam spoke again. "You know, this town's been a sanctuary for people like us, a place to leave the war behind." Nia understood exactly what he meant. Havenwood had become a haven for veterans seeking peace after years of combat, a quiet corner of the world where they could use their skills to build rather than destroy. "Some wars find you no matter how far you run," she said softly. Sam nodded grimly. "At least this time we're fighting for our own ground." When they reached Nia's house, Sam didn't immediately drive away. "You want me to keep watch tonight?" he offered. Nia shook her head. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll be active." Inside, Nia found Aunt Mildred sitting at the kitchen table, cleaning her revolver with practiced hands. She looked up as Nia entered, her expression a question. "It's happening," Nia confirmed. "Festival starts tomorrow. The Shadow Serpents are planning to use it as cover for a major distribution operation." Aunt Mildred continued her methodical cleaning. "And you're right in the middle of it as usual." "Not by choice," Nia said, pouring herself a glass of water. "It's always by choice, Nia." Aunt Mildred set the revolver down carefully. "You could have walked away, called the FBI, and let them handle it, but you didn't." Nia sank into a chair across from her aunt. "They wouldn't have gotten here in time." "Maybe. Or maybe you needed this." Aunt Mildred's eyes, so similar to Nia's own, held no judgment, only understanding. "Some people are built for the fight. Your father was. I think you are too." Nia didn't respond immediately. Her aunt's assessment cut close to a truth she had been avoiding since leaving her classified work. The quiet life in Havenwood had been peaceful, but something had always been missing, the sense of purpose that came with using her skills to protect others. "Get some sleep," Aunt Mildred said, rising from the table with a slight wince as her arthritis protested the movement. "Something tells me you'll need it tomorrow." Nia nodded, helping her aunt to her bedroom before conducting her nightly security check of the house. In the basement, she prepared her equipment for the next day, checking weapons, charging communications devices, laying out tactical gear that could be quickly accessed if needed. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation to a head. The Shadow Serpents, frustrated by the disruptions to their operation, pressed by Maxwell's need to establish a new base quickly, would almost certainly escalate their intimidation tactics. And Nia would be at the center of it all, walking a dangerous line between gathering intelligence and maintaining her increasingly tenuous cover. As she finally lay down to sleep, Nia's mind continued to process contingencies and tactical options. The Shadow Serpents had chosen Havenwood because they thought it was defenseless, a small town with minimal law enforcement and a population too frightened to resist. They had no idea they had invaded a town that housed more combat veterans per capita than almost anywhere in North Carolina, veterans who had found peace but had not forgotten how to fight. And at the center of that resistance, a delivery girl who was far more than she appeared to be. Tomorrow, the Shadow Serpents would begin to understand their mistake, and Leon, the Serpent Maxwell, would learn that some small towns were not as defenseless as they seemed. Nia Washington, delivery girl, former intelligence operative, protector of Havenwood, closed her eyes and prepared for the battle to come. Dawn broke over Havenwood with a golden light that belied the tension gripping the small town. The first day of the Seafood Festival had arrived, and with it the deadline for Nia's answer to Maxwell's offer. Nia rose before sunrise, moving through her morning routine with the focused precision of someone preparing for combat. She dressed in her usual The Daily Grind uniform jeans, t-shirt, indigo apron. But beneath the ordinary appearance, she had prepared for multiple contingencies. The combat knife in her ankle sheath, the slim Kevlar vest under her shirt, the encrypted phone in her pocket, linked to the Veterans Network. In the kitchen, Aunt Mildred was already awake, her arthritis apparently giving her less trouble this morning. She handed Nia a mug of coffee without comment, her eyes saying everything that needed to be said between them. "I might be late tonight," Nia said, breaking the silence. Aunt Mildred nodded. "I'll keep the porch light on." It was a ritual they had observed throughout Nia's time overseas, a simple phrase that carried the weight of all their unspoken fears and hopes. Keep the light on. Come home safe. Nia left the house as the first festival volunteers began setting up booths along Main Street. The normally quiet thoroughfare was transforming into a bustling marketplace with colorful banners strung between lampposts and temporary stages being assembled at either end. The Shadow Serpents were already visible pairs of leather-clad bikers stationed at strategic points throughout the festival grounds, watching the preparations with predatory interest. Nia counted 15 members within her line of sight as she walked toward the cannery warehouse, where Maxwell awaited her answer. She had chosen to walk rather than cycle, a tactical decision that gave her more mobility options should the situation deteriorate. As she approached the warehouse, she noted the increased security. 6 guards now patrolled the perimeter fence, all visibly armed. At the gate, Viper was waiting for her. "Right on time." The woman observed her hard eyes, assessing Nia with renewed interest. "Crusher's waiting inside." Nia followed Viper through the compound, using the opportunity to update her mental map of the Shadow Serpent's operation. The disruptions orchestrated by the Veterans Network had clearly had an impact. Motorcycles sat idle with parts removed, communication equipment lay partially disassembled on workbenches, and the atmosphere among the gang members was one of simmering frustration. Maxwell was in the same command area as before, examining a large map of the festival grounds with Hammer and 2 other lieutenants. He looked up as Nia approached, dismissing the others with a curt nod. "Decision time," he said without preamble. Nia had carefully planned her approach. Not an outright refusal, which would likely result in immediate violence, but not acceptance either. A middle ground that would buy more time. "I'm interested," she said, keeping her voice steady, "but I have conditions." Maxwell's eyebrows rose in surprise. Then he let out a bark of laughter. "Conditions, you've got nerve. I'll give you that." He gestured to a chair across from him. "Let's hear them." Nia maintained the careful balance between confidence and deference that would keep him engaged rather than angered. "First, the daily grind stays protected. No fees, no harassment. Second, I need to know exactly what information you want me to provide. And third, I want payment upfront, half of the first month's salary today." Maxwell studied her with narrowed eyes, clearly reassessing her. "You're either very brave or very stupid coming in here and making demands." "Just practical," Nia replied evenly. "If we're going to work together, we need clear terms." For a long moment, tension hung in the air between them. Then Maxwell surprised her by nodding slowly. "The cafe gets protection free of charge. You provide information on police movements, any feds who show up asking questions, and anything suspicious happening in town." He reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a thick envelope. $300 now, the rest at the end of the week, assuming you deliver." Nia accepted the envelope, using the moment to scan the room again. The command center had been rearranged since her previous visit. Communication equipment consolidated, new maps added to the walls, additional weapons visible on a nearby table. "There's one more thing," Maxwell said, his tone shifting slightly. "I want you to make a special delivery for us today during the festival." Nia maintained her neutral expression. "What kind of delivery?" "Nothing complicated, just a package that needs to reach a buyer." Maxwell slid a small box across the table. "Drop point is the red tent at the south end of the festival grounds. You'll be approached by a man in a Navy suit who will ask if you have a special order from Leon. Hand him this. Get the envelope he gives you in return. Nia picked up the box. Lightweight, about the size of a deck of cards. Almost certainly a sample of whatever illicit substance the Shadow Serpents were planning to distribute through Havenwood. Seems simple enough, she said, pocketing the box. When? Noon, exactly. Don't be late and don't get curious about what's inside. Maxwell's expression hardened. Consider this your loyalty test. Pass it, you're part of the family. Fail. He left the threat unspoken. Nia nodded her understanding. Noon, red tent man in Navy suit, asking for a special order. Good girl. Maxwell's condescending tone made Nia's combat instincts flare, but she kept her reaction carefully controlled. Now, get back to that cafe of yours. Keep your eyes and ears open. Report anything unusual. As Viper escorted her back to the gate, Nia's mind was already formulating the next phase of her plan. The delivery assignment was both a complication and an opportunity, a chance to identify the Shadow Serpent's local buyer, while also gathering evidence of their illicit operation. Once clear of the warehouse, Nia took an indirect route back toward town, using the cover of trees along the road to ensure she wasn't being followed. When she was confident of her privacy, she retrieved her encrypted phone and sent a brief message to the Veterans Network Package Intercept, Red Tent South Festival Ground Noon Navy Suit. The response came seconds later, acknowledged, assets in position. By the time Nia reached the daily grind, the festival was in full swing. Main Street had been transformed into a vibrant marketplace with food vendors, craft booths, and local musicians creating a carnival atmosphere. Tourists and locals alike filled the sidewalks, most unaware of the dangerous undercurrents flowing beneath the cheerful surface of the celebration. Aunt Carol looked up with relief as Nia entered the cafe, which was doing brisk business despite the outdoor festivities. "Thank heavens," she said, rushing over. "I was worried when you didn't show up for your shift." "Sorry," Nia replied, moving behind the counter to grab her apron. "Had some business to take care of. How's it going here?" "Busy, thank God. The festival crowd always brings in good business." Aunt Carol lowered her voice. "Any developments?" Nia glanced around to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. "Things are moving. Stay alert, but act normal. And whatever happens, stay inside the cafe this afternoon." Aunt Carol's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded her understanding. "Be careful, Nia." The morning passed in a whirlwind of activity as Nia maintained her cover serving customers and making local deliveries while continuously scanning for Shadow Serpent members and updating her mental map of their positions throughout town. The gang had established a significant presence at the festival, with members patrolling in pairs, ostensibly maintaining order, but actually laying the groundwork for their distribution operation. Through subtle signals and brief encounters, Nia coordinated with the Veterans Network. Sam Davis, posing as festival maintenance staff, confirmed that the South End Red Tent had been placed under surveillance. Ben Carter, selling fresh catch from his boat at a nearby booth, had identified 4 more Shadow Serpent members posing as festival goers. Dr. Hansen, volunteering at the first aid station, had her medical bag packed with more than just bandages and antiseptic. At 11:40, Nia prepared for the delivery Maxwell had assigned her. She informed Aunt Carol she was taking her lunch break, then slipped out the back door of the cafe, circling around to approach the festival grounds from a direction where she wouldn't be easily observed by the Shadow Serpents stationed on Main Street. The red tent was exactly where Maxwell had indicated, at the south end of the festival grounds, slightly separated from the main cluster of vendor booths. It displayed a banner advertising Coastal Crafts handcrafted seashell art, but Nia noticed there were few actual products on display, and the middle-aged man manning the tent seemed tense and distracted. Nia positioned herself at a food vendor across from the tent, buying a bottle of water to justify her presence while observing the area. At 11:55, she spotted Sam Davis moving equipment nearby, his casual demeanor belying his tactical awareness. A subtle hand signal confirmed that he had the situation under surveillance. At precisely noon, a man in a Navy suit appeared making his way purposefully through the crowd toward the red tent. He was in his late 40s with impeccably groomed dark hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Nia's trained eye immediately identified him as law enforcement. The way he scanned the crowd, the subtle bulge of a concealed weapon under his jacket, the communications device in his ear. The realization hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't a drug buyer. This was a setup. The man in the Navy suit approached the red tent, speaking briefly with the man, before turning to scan the crowd. His eyes passed over Nia without recognition, then continued searching. Nia's mind raced through possibilities. Maxwell had given her a package to deliver to a law enforcement officer, possibly an undercover state police agent or federal agent. Was it a test, a trap, or had Maxwell somehow identified her as a former federal operative and was setting her up to be caught in an illicit transaction? She needed to abort the delivery without revealing that she had recognized the trap. Catching Sam's eyes, she gave the hand signal for mission compromise. He acknowledged with a subtle nod, then moved away, presumably to alert the rest of the network. Nia turned away from the red tent and began walking unhurriedly toward the north end of the festival, maintaining a casual pace that wouldn't attract attention. She had taken only a few steps when a heavy hand fell on her shoulder. "Going somewhere, delivery girl?" Hammer's voice was low and menacing. He stood directly behind her, close enough that she could feel his breath on her neck. "Just getting some lunch before heading back to work," Nia replied, keeping her voice steady. "Funny. Thought you had a delivery to make first." Hammer's grip tightened painfully. Crusher's going to be real disappointed. Nia's combat instincts assessed the situation in milliseconds. Hammer was armed. She could feel the hard outline of a weapon pressed against her side. They were surrounded by festival goers, including many children. Any confrontation here would endanger civilians. "There's been a misunderstanding," she said calmly. "I was just about to make the delivery." Hammer's laugh was cold. "Save it. We've been watching you. Saw you recognize our friend in the Navy suit." His voice dropped even lower. "Turns out you're not the only one who can play undercover delivery girl, or should I say, Agent Washington." The use of her former intelligence agency designation confirmed Nia's suspicions. Somehow, Maxwell had connected more dots than she had anticipated. The delivery had been a test, and she had failed. "Let's go have a chat with Crusher," Hammer continued, beginning to steer her through the crowd. "He's real interested in why a former intelligence operative is delivering coffee in Havenwood." Nia allowed herself to be guided, her mind calculating. Making a scene in the middle of the crowded festival would endanger civilians. Going with Hammer might give her an opportunity to gather more intelligence and potentially access the heart of the Shadow Serpent's operation. Her network knew her last position and would track her movement. As they walked, Nia spotted Ben Carter watching from his seafood stand and gave him the distress signal they had established. His almost imperceptible nod told her the message was received. The network would now activate their contingency plan. Hammer led her to a black SUV parked at the edge of the festival grounds. Two more Shadow Serpents were waiting, both armed with concealed weapons. They flanked Nia as Hammer opened the rear door. "Get in," he ordered, "and don't try anything stupid. There are too many people around who could get hurt." Nia complied, knowing that this was not the time or place for resistance. As the SUV pulled away from the festival, she focused on memorizing their route and identifying landmarks that would help the veterans network track her location. The drive was short, less than 15 minutes before they arrived back at the cannery warehouse. Security had been increased significantly since her morning visit, with armed guards now visible at all entrances. Nia was escorted directly to the command center, where Leon Maxwell waited, his massive frame tense with barely controlled rage. "You disappoint me, Nia," he said as Hammer pushed her into a chair. "I gave you a simple loyalty test and you failed spectacularly." Nia maintained her composure. "There was a man in a Navy suit at the red tent. He was law enforcement. You set me up." Maxwell's eyebrows rose slightly. "Very observant. Yes, he was federal. The question is, how did you know that just by looking at him?" He leaned forward, his massive hands flat on the table between them. "Only someone with law enforcement experience themselves would have spotted it so quickly." "I was military intelligence before joining the civilian sector," Nia replied, offering a partial truth. "You learned to recognize the type." "Indeed." Maxwell studied her for a long moment. "The thing is, Nia, I've been doing some more checking on you. Your government record ends rather abruptly. Then there's a gap of several years before you suddenly reappear in Havenwood. Care to explain what you were doing during that time?" Nia met his gaze steadily. "Classified." Maxwell's laugh held no humor. "That's what I thought. You're not just ex-military. You're some kind of federal agent." "Former," Nia corrected. "I'm retired." "No one in your line of work ever really retires." Maxwell straightened to his full height. "So here's my dilemma. You're clearly working against me. The question is whether you're doing it officially or as some kind of vigilante operation. Nia said nothing, her silence neither confirming nor denying his speculation. Here's what I think. Maxwell continued circling the table to stand directly over her. I think you recognize what we were doing in Havenwood and decided to play hero. Maybe called in some favors from old colleagues, but you're not here in any official capacity, are you? If you were there, would have been a task force in town the day after we arrived. His assessment was uncomfortably accurate, but Nia maintained her neutral expression. The problem for you, Maxwell said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble, is that vigilantes don't have backup. They don't have extraction plans. They're alone. He was wrong about that, of course. The Veterans Network would already be implementing their contingency plan, but Nia needed to keep him talking to gather more intelligence and buy time. What do you want, Maxwell? She asked directly. Originally a new base of operations somewhere quiet off the radar with easy distribution routes to major cities. Maxwell shrugged his massive shoulders. Now, to find out who else knows about our operation here, and to make an example of the delivery girl who thought she could stand in our way. The threat was clear, but Nia had faced worse. Killing a former federal agent brings heat you can't handle. Who said anything about killing? Maxwell smiled coldly. There are other ways to send a message. He turned to Hammer. Take her to the back room. Find out who else in town is working with her, how much they know, who they've contacted outside Havenwood. Hammer's answering smile sent a chill through even Nia's combat-hardened nerves. With pleasure, boss. As they led her through the warehouse, Nia continued her tactical assessment. The Shadow Serpent's operation had expanded since her last observation. More illicit goods, more weapons, more members. What had begun as an advance force was now a full-scale base of operations with at least 35 gang members present. The back room turned out to be a small office that had been cleared of furniture, except for a single metal chair. Nia was roughly pushed into it, her hands zip-tied to the arms by one of Hammer's associates. Make yourself comfortable, Hammer said, pulling a knife from his belt and testing the edge with his thumb. We're going to have a long conversation. Nia had been trained to resist interrogation, but she knew that even the best training had its limits. She needed to implement her extraction plan before things escalated further. You're making a mistake, she said calmly. I'm not alone. Hammer paused, the knife hovering inches from her face. Is that right? Your geriatric electrician friend coming to save you? Not just him. Nia met his gaze without flinching. Did Maxwell tell you why he chose Havenwood? Did he mention that this town has the highest concentration of former military and intelligence specialists per capita on the coast? A flicker of uncertainty crossed Hammer's face, quickly replaced by contempt. Old men telling war stories at the bar, not exactly special forces. Actually, Nia replied, that's exactly what they are. Before Hammer could respond, the lights in the warehouse flickered and went out, plunging the windowless room into darkness. Seconds later, the distant sound of the generator shutting down was followed by confused shouts from the main floor. Nia had been anticipating this moment. The Veterans Network had planned for various contingencies, including her capture. The power outage was the first phase of their extraction protocol. In the darkness, Nia activated the small device hidden in her watch, a localized EMP that fried the electronic lock on the door and temporarily disabled any surveillance equipment in the room. Simultaneously, she executed a move she had practiced countless times in training, dislocating her thumb to slip out of the zip tie on her right hand, then using her freed hand to release her left. Hammer, momentarily disoriented by the sudden darkness, didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. Nia was already moving her combat training, taking over as she delivered a precise strike to his throat that left him gasping for air. She retrieved his knife as he crumpled to the floor, using it to cut the remaining restraints from her wrists. By the time the emergency lighting kicked in dim red bulbs that cast more shadows than illumination, Nia was positioned beside the door, Hammer's unconscious form at her feet. Outside, chaos had erupted. The Veterans' extraction plan was in full effect, multiple simultaneous disruptions designed to create confusion and divide the Shadow Serpent's forces. Through the door, Nia could hear shouting, the crash of equipment being overturned, and the distinctive pop of smoke grenades being deployed. She waited for a momentary lull in the commotion, then eased the door open just enough to assess the situation. The main floor of the warehouse was filled with swirling smoke punctuated by the red emergency lights that gave the scene a hellish glow. Shadow Serpent members were rushing in multiple directions, some attempting to secure their illicit shipment, others grabbing weapons, all reacting to threats from different directions. Naya spotted her opportunity, a clear path to the side exit, momentarily unguarded as the Shadow Serpents responded to what they believed was a full-scale assault. In reality, the Veterans Network had deployed a series of diversionary tactics, smoke grenades, sound devices that mimicked gunfire, targeted disruptions to security systems, all designed to create the impression of a larger force than actually existed. Moving silently through the chaos, Nia made her way toward the exit, avoiding direct confrontation where possible. When a Shadow Serpent emerged suddenly from the smoke in front of her, she dispatched him with a quick, efficient strike that left him unconscious but alive. She had almost reached the side door when a massive figure loomed out of the smoke behind her. Leon Maxwell, a shotgun in his hands and fury in his eyes. "Running away, Agent Washington!" His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Naya turned slowly to face him, her body automatically shifting into a combat stance. "Stand down, Maxwell. It's over." He laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "Over, this is just a minor inconvenience. My boys will have this sorted out in 15 minutes. "Your boys are about to have bigger problems," Naya replied calmly. "The federal tactical team you spotted earlier, they were just the advanced scouts. The main force is already in position." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Maxwell's face, but he kept the shotgun trained on her. "You're bluffing, aren't you?" Naya nodded toward the windows, where the distant sound of sirens could now be heard. "That's not part of our distraction plan." Maxwell's eyes narrowed as he processed this information. The sirens were indeed getting closer. Not just one or two, but what sounded like a full tactical response. "Even if that's true," he growled, "you won't live to see it." He raised the shotgun, but Nia was already moving. Years of combat training had honed her reflexes to a razor's edge. She sidestepped the shotgun's aim and closed the distance between them with explosive speed. Maxwell, despite his size, wasn't prepared for the focused violence of her attack. Nia struck with precision, targeting vulnerable points with practiced efficiency. A knife hand strike to the throat, an elbow to the solar plexus, a sweeping kick that unbalanced his massive frame. Maxwell staggered back, gasping for breath, the shotgun swinging wildly. Naya ducked beneath it, then delivered a devastating palm strike to his sternum that sent him crashing into a stack of crates. He recovered more quickly than she expected, his face contorted with rage as he lunged forward, abandoning the shotgun in favor of his massive fists. One blow caught Nia on the shoulder, the impact like a sledgehammer that sent her spinning sideways. Naya rolled with the momentum, using Maxwell's greater mass against him. As he charged forward, she pivoted and redirected his force, sending him crashing into a support column. The impact dazed him momentarily, giving Naya the opening she needed. She delivered a rapid series of strikes to vulnerable nerve clusters, techniques taught only to elite special operators. Maxwell's massive body convulsed as pain signals overwhelmed his nervous system. With a final, precisely calculated blow to a pressure point at the base of his skull, Nia sent the Shadow Serpent's leader crashing to the floor. He lay there conscious, but immobilized, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Naya stood over him, her breathing controlled despite the exertion of the fight. Never underestimate a delivery girl, Maxwell. The side door burst open and Sam Davis appeared, a tactical vest over his canvas shirt and a military-grade radio in his hand. "Time to go," he said urgently. "Federal agents are 2 minutes out." Nia nodded, giving Maxwell a final glance. "Your new accommodations won't be nearly as nice as Havenwood. Federal Supermax cells are rather cramped, I hear." Maxwell's only response was a groan of pain and fury as Naya and Sam made their exit into the chaos outside. The scene around the warehouse was one of controlled mayhem. The Veterans Network had executed their plan with military precision, creating multiple diversions, channeling the Shadow Serpent's response in predictable directions, and securing exit routes for their extraction team. Ben Carter was waiting in a battered fishing boat, the engine running and the door open. "Federal agents are moving in from the north," he reported as Naya and Sam climbed in. "Sheriff Ramirez has the main road blocked. Looks like most of the Shadow Serpents are choosing to surrender rather than fight." "Maxwell?" Sam asked as Ben accelerated away from the warehouse. "Temporarily paralyzed," Nia replied. "The pressure point technique will wear off in about 25 minutes. Plenty of time for them to secure him." They traveled in silence for several minutes, following back channels to avoid the incoming law enforcement convoy. Nia's mind was already shifting from combat mode to the next phase, ensuring the evidence against the Shadow Serpents was properly secured, coordinating with federal authorities, and protecting the identities of the Veterans Network. "You okay?" Sam asked, noting her distant expression. Nia nodded. "Just planning next steps." Ben guided the boat to a stop at a pre-arranged meeting point, Dr. Hansen's private dock, shielded from the road by a dense grove of palms. Dr. Hansen was waiting for them, her medical bag at her feet. "Any casualties?" she asked as they approached. "None on our side," Sam reported. "Can't speak for the Shadow Serpents." Dr. Hansen nodded in satisfaction. "Mayor Vance is coordinating with the festival security team. They're keeping the civilians contained to the north end of town, away from the warehouse operation." Nia checked her watch. "The federal agents will have the warehouse secured by now. We need to establish our cover story before they start questioning witnesses." The veterans exchanged glances, then nodded in agreement. They had prepared for this moment, the transition from covert operation back to their civilian identities. "Standard protocol," Sam confirmed. "We were never there, just concerned citizens who reported suspicious activity to the proper authorities." "And?" Nia Ben asked, glancing at her. "I'll handle the federal agents," she replied. "They'll be curious about a former operative living in Havenwood, but they won't press too hard. Professional courtesy." Dr. Hansen handed her a set of car keys. "My car's in the garage. Better not show up on a bicycle after what you've been through." Nia accepted the keys with a grateful nod. "I need to get back to the daily grind. Aunt Carol will be worried." As she drove through town, Nia observed the aftermath of their operation with professional satisfaction. The festival crowds had been successfully contained to the northern section of Main Street, supervised by Mayor Vance and her impromptu security team. Sheriff Ramirez and his deputies were maintaining roadblocks at strategic points, directing federal vehicles toward the warehouse, and there was no sign of Shadow Serpent members anywhere on the streets of Havenwood. When Nia pulled up behind the daily grind, Aunt Carol burst through the back door, her face etched with worry. "Thank God," she exclaimed, pulling Nia into an unexpected hug. "When I heard all the commotion and saw the police cars, I feared the worst." Nia returned the hug briefly before gently disengaging. "It's over Aunt Carol. The Shadow Serpents have been arrested. The town is safe." Aunt Carol studied her face, noting the bruise forming on Nia's cheek, where Maxwell's blow had connected. "You weren't just making deliveries today, were you?" Nia smiled slightly. "Let's just say I delivered something more important than coffee." Inside the cafe business was surprisingly normal. Despite the drama unfolding across town, regular customers sat at their usual tables. Tourists sought refuge from the redirected festival crowds, and the coffee pot was working overtime. Nia slipped behind the counter, washing her hands and donning her apron as if it were any other day. The routine actions helped center her, transitioning her mind from combat operator back to delivery girl. Over the next few hours, news filtered in through customers and the local radio station. The federal agency had conducted a major bust at the old cannery warehouse. Dozens of Shadow Serpent members had been arrested, including their leader, Leon the Serpent Maxwell. A significant quantity of illegal substances had been seized, along with weapons and evidence of a large-scale distribution operation. Sheriff Ramirez was being credited with coordinating with federal authorities, though he seemed surprisingly modest in the brief statement he gave to reporters. No mention was made of a veterans network or a delivery girl who had initiated the entire operation. Just as Nia was preparing for the evening closing routine, the cafe door opened to admit a man she recognized immediately, the navy suit from the festival, the undercover federal agent who had been part of Maxwell's trap. He took a seat at the counter, ordered coffee from Aunt Carol, and waited patiently until Nia approached him. "Quite a day in Havenwood," he commented, his voice casual but his eyes sharp and assessing. Nia wiped down the counter, matching his tone. "Festival always brings excitement. Some more than others." He sipped his coffee, then set the cup down carefully. "Agent David Vance, Federal Bureau. Though I suspect you already knew the agency part." Nia maintained her cover seamlessly. "Just a delivery girl, Agent Vance." He smiled slightly. "Of course, and I'm just passing through town." He reached into his jacket and produced a business card, sliding it across the counter. "If the delivery girl ever wants to make a career change, there are people who would be very interested in talking to her." Nia glanced at the card, plain white, with only a phone number embossed on it. No name, no agency, a direct line to someone with significant authority. "I'll keep that in mind," she said, pocketing the card. "But I'm pretty happy with my current job." Vance nodded, understanding the subtext of her response. He left a generous tip for his coffee and headed toward the door, pausing to add, "By the way, Maxwell keeps insisting he was taken down by, and I quote, some kind of ninja librarian. Interesting story. Sounds like he hit his head during the arrest," Nia suggested mildly. Vance's smile widened slightly. "Must have. The official report will reflect that he resisted arrest and was subdued by federal tactical officers. He tipped an imaginary hat. You take care now, Miss Washington." After he left, Aunt Carol approached Nia with wide eyes. "Was that just a customer?" Nia replied, resuming her closing duties. "Festival brings all types to town." The seafood festival continued for 2 more days, though, with a significantly altered atmosphere. The Shadow Serpent's presence had vanished completely, replaced by an increased law enforcement visibility that reassured tourists and locals alike. The official story, a smuggling organization attempting to use the festival as cover for their operation, thwarted by a coordinated local and federal law enforcement, was accepted without question by most. Only a select few knew the truth that a network of veterans led by an unassuming delivery girl with a classified past had protected their town when official channels would have been too late. On the festival's final evening, as fireworks exploded over Havenwood Bay, Nia sat on the porch of her small house watching the display with Aunt Mildred beside her. "So," Aunt Mildred said after a companionable silence, "what happens now?" Nia considered the question, her fingers absently touching the federal business card in her pocket. "We go back to normal. I deliver coffee. You garden. The town moves on." Aunt Mildred gave her niece a knowing look. "And when the next threat comes, because there's always another one, isn't there?" Nia didn't immediately respond. The events of the past few days had awakened something in her, a sense of purpose that had been dormant since she'd left her classified work. Havenwood wasn't just a quiet town where she could disappear. It was a community worth protecting, and she wasn't alone in that mission. "If another threat comes," she finally said, "they'll find Havenwood better prepared than they expect." Aunt Mildred nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. "Your father would be proud. He always said you had a gift for finding trouble and the skill to handle it when you did." The fireworks reached their crescendo, filling the night sky with cascades of color and light. Throughout Havenwood, people watched in wonder, most unaware of how close their peaceful town had come to becoming collateral damage in the Shadow Serpent's operation. The next morning, Nia arrived at the Daily Grind at her usual time 10 minutes before opening. She moved through her familiar routine, brewing coffee, checking supplies, wiping down already clean counters. Aunt Carol arrived at 5:58, unlocking the front door with the same brass key her sister had used before her. She raised an eyebrow at Nia, who was already in full uniform. "After everything that happened," Aunt Carol commented, hanging her weathered denim jacket on the coat rack, "you're still the first one here." Nia poured a cup of coffee and handed it to her boss. "Some things don't change." Aunt Carol accepted the coffee, then fixed Nia with a direct gaze. "But some things do. You're different than you were before the Shadow Serpents came to town. Or maybe you're just more yourself now." Nia considered this assessment. Maybe both. The morning proceeded with its usual rhythm of regular customers' familiar orders and easy conversation. By 8:30 a.m., the post-festival cleanup was underway on Main Street, and Havenwood was beginning its return to normalcy. Nia was organizing delivery orders when the bell above the door chimed. Sam Davis entered, taking his usual seat at the counter. But today, he was joined by Ben Carter, Dr. Lena Hansen, and Mayor Eleanor Vance, the core of the Veterans Network that had protected Havenwood. Nia set coffee cups in front of each of them, exchanging subtle nods of recognition. No words were needed between them. They had faced a threat together and emerged victorious, bonds forged in shared purpose that went beyond verbal expression. "Nice quiet town you've got here," Sam commented, his weathered face revealing the ghost of a smile. "Let's keep it that way," Nia replied, a new certainty in her voice. As she moved through her day, serving customers, making deliveries, exchanging pleasant conversation, Nia Washington, the unassuming delivery girl from the Daily Grind, carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had found her place in the world. Havenwood would remain a sanctuary for those seeking peace after years of conflict, But it was also something more, a community protected by unlikely guardians, veterans who had found purpose in civilian life without forgetting the skills that had defined their military service. And at the center of that protection stood Nia Washington, who had discovered that sometimes the most important deliveries weren't food or packages, but safety and security for the people and places that mattered most. The story of how a biker gang leader slapped a delivery girl and ended up curled beneath a stack of crates would never appear in the Havenwood Chronicle. It would never be told in full to the tourists who visited for the seafood festival or to the new residents who moved to the small town seeking its peaceful atmosphere. But in the quiet corners of the daily grind, in the knowing glances exchanged between certain veterans when strangers passed through town, in the way Nia Washington scanned every room she entered with the practiced eye of someone who had seen the darkness in the world and stood against it, the legacy of those few days would endure. And any future threat that came to Havenwood would discover perhaps too late the danger of underestimating a small town and its seemingly ordinary residents, especially a delivery girl who was far more than she appeared to be.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.